Bridging the ineffable, how sacred symbols connect to awakened consciousness. You know that feeling when you have an experience that's so profound, so utterly beyond words, that when you try to explain it to someone, you just can't? The words feel empty, inadequate, like trying to describe color to someone who's never seen. Maybe it happened during meditation, or in a moment of deep connection with nature, perhaps during a crisis, or in that liminal space between sleep and waking. For a moment, or maybe it was timeless, you touched something vast, something that completely shattered your normal way of experiencing reality. And then you came back, and the experience started fading, like a dream slipping through your fingers the moment you wake up. But here's what's fascinating. For thousands of years, across every continent, in cultures that never contacted each other, human beings kept drawing the same shapes, creating the same patterns, carving the same symbols into stone. The ancient Egyptians encoded them into temple walls. Buddhist monks traced them in sand. Medieval Christians embedded them in cathedral windows. Indigenous peoples wove them into sacred textiles. Islamic architects tessellated them into mosque ceilings that seemed to breathe with mathematical perfection. The flower of life appears in the Temple of Osiris in Egypt, dated to at least 535 BCE. But it also shows up in ancient China, in Japan, in Turkey, in India. Cultures separated by thousands of miles and hundreds of years, all obsessed with the same geometric pattern. The spiral, perhaps humanity's oldest symbol, adorns Neolithic tombs in Ireland from 3200 BCE, Hopi petroglyphs in Arizona, Aboriginal rock art in Australia, and appears in the sacred architecture of ancient Greece and Mesopotamia. Why? Why would civilizations that couldn't possibly have communicated all independently arrive at these exact same forms? The traditional answer is usually some version of universal archetypes or collective unconscious. And maybe. But I think something else is happening here. Something more practical, more experiential. These weren't just pretty decorations or cultural traditions. They were technologies, consciousness technologies, ways of encoding, preserving, and transmitting experiences that transcend ordinary language. Tonight, I want to talk about something most spiritual teachings don't really address. How do you keep these awakened experiences alive? How do you bring them back with you? And this is where sacred symbols come in, but not in the way you might think. This isn't about memorizing what the tree of life means or learning the correct interpretation of the Ankh. This is about understanding how these symbols actually work with your consciousness, how they function as bridges between the mystical and the mundane. The problem of return. Imagine you're a deep-sea diver. You descend far below the surface, deeper than most people ever go. Down there, you encounter this completely alien world. Creatures that glow with their own light. Colors that don't exist at the surface. The pressure changes everything. Even light bends differently down there. It's beautiful. It's terrifying. It's utterly unlike anything you've ever known. Now you surface, and someone asks, "What was it like?" How do you even begin? The words fish and blue feel almost offensive in their inadequacy. And here's what's really challenging. Without some way to hold on to what you experienced, the memory itself starts dissolving. The details blur. The feeling becomes distant. Eventually, you're left with just this vague sense that something profound happened, but you can't quite grasp it anymore. This is exactly what happens with mystical experiences, with moments of awakening. You touch something that exists beyond the boundaries of ordinary language and conceptual thinking. Subject and object collapse. Time becomes meaningless. The very sense of being a separate you dissolves into something vast and unified. And then you're back, making coffee, checking your phone. And how do you carry that experience with you? This is where sacred symbols become absolutely crucial. And I don't mean they're just reminders or pretty pictures. They function as what I'd call compression algorithms for consciousness. They can't contain the full experience. That would be impossible. But they can preserve its essential structure, its pattern, its frequency. Now, I know this might sound abstract. Symbols as consciousness technologies, bridges between worlds. So let me show you exactly how this works, not in theory, but through an example you can actually feel, starting with humanity's oldest symbol. The spiral, a living example. Let's get practical. Think about the spiral. It's probably humanity's oldest sacred symbol. You find it everywhere, carved into 5,000-year-old stone monuments, traced by Sufi dancers, growing in seashells, spiraling through galaxies, woven into the structure of DNA itself. Why? Why this pattern, across all cultures, across all time? Here's what I've come to understand. When you have certain types of expanded awareness, what some traditions call non-dual consciousness, the experience often has these qualities. You're moving inward and outward simultaneously. There's a sense of cycles, but each cycle brings you somewhere new. You never quite return to where you started. The center and the edge somehow become the same thing. And there's this paradox of absolute stillness containing infinite motion. Now, the spiral doesn't explain any of this intellectually. That's not its function. But when you come back from that experience and you encounter the spiral symbol, something in your being recognizes it. Not your thinking mind, something deeper. Your nervous system, your consciousness itself, finds a form that matches the pattern you just lived through. The symbol becomes a handle, a way to hold something that can't be held in concepts or words. The impossible city. Let me share an analogy that might help. Imagine you're a map maker and you visit a city where the laws of physics don't quite work like they do here. Buildings shift and phase through dimensions. Streets curve through impossible geometries. A location might exist in 3 places at once. You obviously can't map this place with normal cartography. A regular map would be useless, instantly outdated and completely misleading. So instead, you develop a symbolic language, a spiral glyph that means space folds back on itself here, a fractal pattern indicating this pattern repeats at every scale, a mandala representing all points are equally center and edge. These aren't representations of the city, they're navigational tools. Someone else who visits that impossible city can use your symbols to orient themselves, to recognize features they'd otherwise have no way to retain or communicate. And here's the key. The symbols work because they match structures in consciousness itself, not just external things. They're describing the territory of awareness, resonance, and recognition. Sacred symbols work like tuning forks. You know how if you strike a tuning fork in a room full of musical instruments, only the ones tuned to that specific frequency will start vibrating in response? Everything else stays silent. That's what happens with symbols and consciousness. Let's say you've experienced ego dissolution, that moment when the boundary of self becomes permeable, when you and everything else start bleeding into each other. It's usually both terrifying and ecstatic. The most real thing you've ever felt, and also the most disorienting. Later, you might encounter a mandala. And if you've had that experience, the mandala resonates differently. You're not just seeing a pretty circle with patterns. You're recognizing something. The mandala encodes the relationship between boundary and boundlessness. It shows you how edges can define a space while simultaneously dissolving into it. Or you see the vesika piscis, 2 circles overlapping, creating a third space between them. And suddenly, you understand it not conceptually, but experientially. That's what happened to you. 2 apparently separate things, self and other, form and emptiness, time and timelessness, overlapped, and in that overlap, something entirely new emerged. The symbol reactivates the pattern. It's more than memory. It's like the symbol tunes your consciousness back to that frequency, allowing you a taste of the experience without needing the full intensity of the original trigger. The music box. Here's another way to think about it. Imagine a musician who hears a symphony performed by an orchestra that exists partially in another dimension. She hears notes between the notes, harmonies that somehow include both sound and silence at the same time. It completely transforms her understanding of what music can be. But she can't reproduce it. The instruments literally don't exist in our world, so she crafts a music box, simple, delicate. When it plays, it's just a sweet little melody. But here's what makes it special. The intervals, the relationships between the notes, match the structure of that impossible symphony. Same pattern, different scale. Most people hear it and think it's pleasant, nice. But the musician, when she hears it, she's transported. Her consciousness recognizes the pattern, and suddenly she can access the memory of the full experience. The symbol, the melody, bridges her everyday awareness back to the transcendent. That's what authentic sacred symbols do. They're not the experience itself, but they're encoded with its structure. And for those who've been there, they open doorways. Symbols as doorways. Now here's where it gets really interesting. Symbols don't just preserve experiences. They can invoke them. Think about the lotus flower. It's not just Buddhist decoration. Look at its actual structure, roots anchored in mud, stem reaching through water, bloom opening in air. It's literally existing in three elements simultaneously. When you meditate on the lotus, you're not thinking about these levels philosophically. Something else happens. The symbol activates a recognition that you too exist on multiple levels at once. Your physical body, your emotional life, your mental awareness, your transcendent nature, all happening simultaneously, like the lotus in its elements. The symbol doesn't tell you this. It shows you. It creates a direct experience of multi-layered existence. I like to think of consciousness as a vast house. Most of us live on the ground floor. We know it well, the kitchen, the living room, the daily routines. Sometimes we glimpse a staircase, but the door is locked. A mystical experience is like suddenly finding yourself on the 7th floor. The perspective is completely different. You can see things about the building that are invisible from the ground floor. The architecture seems to violate what you thought were the building's limits. But you can't stay there. You haven't learned to navigate those spaces yet. So you return to the ground floor, and already the experience feels dreamlike. Did it even happen? Sacred symbols are like skeleton keys, not skeleton as in death, but skeletal in structure. Minimal, essential forms that can interface with multiple locks. They give you access to the stairwell, not for permanent residence in altered states. That would just be another form of escapism, but for bringing wisdom from the upper floors into your everyday life. Integration. That's what they enable. The living symbol. Here's something most teachings miss. These symbols are alive. They grow with you. The first time you encounter the tree of life, you might just see a hierarchical structure. Roots, trunk, branches. Pretty straightforward. Come back to it after some spiritual practice, after some life experience, and you start noticing the flow goes both ways. Sap rises from roots to leaves, but fallen leaves feed the roots. It's circular. Go deeper still, and the tree stops being a hierarchy at all. It becomes a unified field. Root and branch are just different expressions of the same living system happening simultaneously. Keep going, and eventually you realize you are the tree. It's not a symbol of something else. It's a mirror showing you your own consciousness structure. Your roots in the material world, your branches in the transcendent, all one continuous living growth. And if you go even further, the tree dissolves entirely. There's just growth itself, the life force without any object. No tree, no you, just this ongoing unfoldment. Each level isn't more correct than the others. Each is true at its own depth. The symbol accommodates your expanding awareness, like it's revealing new dimensions that were always there but you couldn't perceive yet. The danger of premature knowledge. But I need to be honest about something. There's a real danger in learning about symbols too soon, in the wrong way. If you study what the Ankh means, memorize interpretations of the Sri Yantra, collect symbolic knowledge intellectually, you risk filling the space where direct experience should happen with concepts. The symbol becomes a substitute for awakening instead of a bridge to it. It's like someone who studies cuisine intensely. They learn all the terminology, can discuss flavor profiles, knows every technique, but they've never actually tasted the food. When they finally sit down to eat, their mind is so full of concepts that they can't actually taste what's in front of them. They're too busy comparing, categorizing, evaluating. The menu has replaced the meal. This is why authentic traditions always emphasize experience first, symbols second. You meditate, you practice, you undergo direct transformation. Only then are you given the symbols, because now they're mapping territory you've actually walked. They have something real to anchor to. Bringing it home. So how does this work in daily life? Let's say you have a breakthrough in meditation. Maybe time stops. Boundaries dissolve. You're flooded with this overwhelming sense of love, or peace, or connection, or maybe terror, often all of them at once. It's the most real thing you've ever experienced. A few hours later, you're stuck in traffic. Someone cuts you off. You're irritated, contracted, completely back in ordinary consciousness. The mystical experience might as well have happened to someone else, in some other lifetime. But if you've properly integrated a symbol with that expanded state, just recalling it can interrupt the contraction. You visualize the mandala. Trace the spiral in your mind. Remember the flame. You're not trying to force yourself back into the full mystical state. That would be dangerous while driving. But the symbol whispers a reminder. You know there are other floors in this building. This traffic frustration is real, but it's not the whole truth. It's not all you are. That shift, that's the practical magic of symbols. They keep you connected to the bigger picture while you navigate the smaller one. Transmission between souls. There's one more function that's profound. When two people have both touched genuine mystical experience, symbols become a language beyond language. You draw a simple infinity symbol. Another person who's been to that place sees it and just knows. There's no need for explanation. You're not agreeing on an interpretation. You're recognizing a shared reality. You've both been to the place where opposites interpenetrate, where endings and beginnings are the same movement, where two becomes one without erasing the two-ness. A single glance, a symbol, and entire dimensions of experience are transmitted. It's like veterans of the same war. They can exchange a look across a crowded room and communicate things that no words could carry. Not because they experienced the same specific events, but because they've inhabited the same state of consciousness. Sacred symbols work this way among people who've walked similar paths. The eye and the triangle, the Ouroboros, yin-yang. These become recognition codes, silent acknowledgments between souls who visited certain territories. The bridge. Let me bring this all together with one final image. Picture two cliffs. One represents ordinary, everyday consciousness, work, relationships, paying bills, all the practical stuff of life. The other represents transcendent awareness, unity, infinity, the dissolution of boundaries, direct perception of the sacred. Most people never leave the first cliff. It's safe there, familiar. Some people leap to the second cliff and can't get back. They become ungrounded, lost in transcendent states, unable to function in daily life. Others visit the second cliff, But the journey back is so disorienting, so destabilizing, that they never want to go again. They shut down that capacity. Sacred symbols are the suspension bridge. They span the chasm between worlds. They let you travel both directions, bringing treasures from the transcendent into the everyday and maintaining awareness of the everyday while you're in transcendent states. The awakened life isn't about living on either cliff exclusively, it's about living on the bridge itself. In the dynamic tension, the creative space between ordinary and non-ordinary consciousness, symbols make that bridge visible. They make it traversable. They make it safe. In closing, so let's bring this full circle. Sacred symbols connect to consciousness not as information to be learned, but as living resonance. They are anchors that keep mystical experiences from evaporating when you return to normal awareness, tuning forks that reactivate expanded states through recognition and resonance, doorways that allow conscious access to different dimensions of awareness, mirrors that reveal deeper layers as your consciousness develops, scaffolding that helps you integrate awakening into embodied daily life, transmission devices allowing soul-to-soul communication beyond words, and bridges, beautiful, golden bridges, spanning the space between the finite and infinite, the personal and universal, the mundane and the sacred. The symbol doesn't represent the ineffable, it participates in it. When your consciousness encounters a symbol that truly matches your direct experience, something magical happens. The boundary between the symbol and what it points to dissolves. It's not pointing anymore. It is the experience, compressed into a form that can survive the journey back to ordinary reality. This is why awakened humans throughout history have treasured these symbols, not as religious icons or mystical decorations, but as life rafts, as vessels that allow the infinite to leave fingerprints in the finite world. So next time you encounter a sacred symbol in a temple, a book, a moment of meditation, don't just ask what it means. Feel into it. Ask what state of consciousness it might be encoding. What territory is it mapping? What frequency is it holding? And if you've been to that territory yourself, notice how the symbol doesn't explain your experience. It echoes it, confirms it, holds space for it in a world that has no other language for what you've touched. That echo, that resonance, that bridge between worlds, you're standing on it right now. May your symbols stay alive. May your experiences stay integrated. May you walk the bridge between worlds with grace. Thank you for diving deep with me today.